Look, first of all, thanks for all of you guys being here. My only complaint is I don't see enough women. Going on to the last speaker, we'd love to see, your sisters, your aunts, your children coming in to technology, because it is the right place and the right time. Anybody see the price of a barrel of oil today? $43 barrel of oil. And that's ironic based on what I'm about to tell you, quite seriously. Oil has never been as low as it has been, well, never, for a long time, decades. So I want to talk about the fact that you guys and girls studying what you're studying are in the right place at the right time. But I want to ask you this question. So, true story. This company asked a group of people to map every location of every business, house and street number in France. Think about that. How would you do that? Right? It would take, let's say you sat down with 100 people, maybe it'd take you a year going out to every single location in France. Right? Maybe in 2 years, I don't know. And that's if you were smart. Right? That's the way the world thinks, but actually, and this is a true story, happened in December. It took Google 1 hour. 1 hour, true story. How did they do it? They used Streetwise. They sent out a few people and said, go and use Streetwise and take some pictures of some real homes, some real buildings, offices, and mark out the numbers on each of those homes. At the same time, they wrote some code, artificial intelligence, that could read those scribbles, match it with images, and start doing what was required. They took that code, they put 100 million streetwise images into the machine, the computer, and it took them, drilling into Paris and the whole of France, 1 hour. True story. Now this is really important, because what we're seeing happening, and I'm talking about in the last few decades to today, we're at an inflection point. An inflection point which is kind of calibrated by, up until now, we have been constrained by what we call human scale, what was in our brains. And we've been constrained in healthcare, in transport, in agriculture, in mining, by what was in our brains. The ability to analyze what was between the two ears. But that constraint has now moved on to this third phase of the internet, which we call the Internet of Everything. We're now into what we call machine scale, where now machines are controlling machines, and where machines can see far more than the human brain. They can do far more than the human brain. This is the industry that you're right in the middle of, and the transition point that we're right in the middle of. Because if you looked at the industrial age, what was the fuel for factories and machines? It was oil. And then we distilled it. We pulled it out of the ground, we harnessed it, we distilled it, and we got E10, 74, whatever it is, right? And it's literally, I don't say data's not the new gold, because gold you can pull out of the ground, wash it, and you can sell it. Oil's a bit more difficult, but it's incredibly valuable. But what we're seeing today is data is the new oil. Because that is what is really the gasoline behind modern industry. Anybody, been on one of these? When you fly between Melbourne and Sydney, that jet generates 10 terabytes of data. Now, if you think that's a lot of data, right? One of those guys takes off every 3 seconds. So what's going on? GE is instrumenting the jet engine. There's about 200 sensors in there producing 5,000 data points a second via fiber optics, going into a data center in the US, back into the jet engine closed loop, machine scale, and optimizing the gas flow, the spin, etc., getting far higher efficiencies, more safety. That's what we call the Internet of Everything. It's only when there's an exception. So the machines in the US can predict, based on the data points, that engine 3, part number 103 is going to threshold in 2 days' time. So when it lands in Singapore, send the human out, the mechanic, to go and change that path. That's the exception, not the rule. Going from this open loop to a closed loop, that's what's going on around the world. That's the world that we're about to see the beginning of. And it's, you know, whether we talk about airlines, this is smart meters. That's across the US, 0.5 terabytes a day. Huge amounts of data. So I'm going to ask you this. This is a trick question. You've got two choices, A and B. A, I'm going to give you $100 a day. $100 a day for 38 days. Okay, that's A. B, I'm going to give you 1 cent, and I'm going to double it every day. B. Who's A? Who's A? A. Okay. Think about it. On A, in 38 days, that's $3,800, correct? Anybody know what B is in 38 days?
36 million.
What did you say? 100 million? 1.3 billion. 1.3 billion. That's a really important point. Dig into it and see what I'm saying here. Because what's going on, you go back a few years, there were very few computers. Now we've got mobile phones. Now we've got phones with multi-core, 2, 4, 8 core. Your computer's got multi-core. We've got sensors. We've got computers everywhere. Not just one processor producing data, but the processors themselves are more powerful. Plus, you've got multiple processors. It's prolific. We've got already 11 billion things connected to the internet. We predict there's going to be 50 billion by 2020. That's what's going on. And so what? How we think must change. All of us at school were taught what's called causal thinking. Ask, why does this happen? Why does it happen? What's the answer to that particular transaction? But as we move into the world of data, we've got to change, because here's an example. You're in your car, and the car says if you go to work, and you go the normal route, which is your blue route, it's today going to take you 45 minutes longer. Well, you can take the red route. I know what I'd do. I'd take the red route. I'm not going to argue with the car. I'm going to take the red route, right? Okay. I didn't ask why. I just said what. Likewise, my defib in my heart. I'm an old lady, and this thing starts going off. It says, Mrs. Huddleston, in 2 days you're going to have a shock. Does Mrs. Huddleston have an argument with the defib, or does she just go to the doctor? Go to the doctor. And we can continue that story. Really important point. Exemplified by this guy. So he's at the World Pacific Predictive Analytics Conference, and he's standing there at a conference like this, and he's got this glass jar full of dollar notes. And he says to every participant, guess how many dollar notes there are in the glass jar? Guess how many dollar notes there are in the glass jar? Correct answer, $362. The closest guess was $10 off. When he averaged everybody's guesses, this is what he got. It's basically called the ensemble principle. It's common sense. And the ensemble principle says this. Predictions can be improved by averaging the predictions of many. We're talking in maths about correlation theory. The more data you get, the more accurate your prediction is. Anybody heard of Watson? Watson's this computer that IBM created to play Jeopardy. You know Jeopardy? It's really difficult to program that computer, right? Really difficult, because Jeopardy can ask any question about anything. So it's a real challenge. It's harder than even playing chess. So what has IBM actually done? Well, first of all, Watson started beating humans several years ago. But here's the interesting point. Watson doesn't come up with the right answer. Never comes up with the right answer. You know what it does? It comes up with the answer that is statistically the most probable of being right. Really important what I'm telling you here, because this is the world you are moving into. It's a world of correlation. An oncologist, true story, oncologist in the United States has some really tough, that's a cancer doctor by the way, really tough problem. Sitting in front of a patient, this is a true story, has to diagnose or has to prescribe drugs to this patient. Now normally that oncologist has got a choice of 8 pairs. You do the maths, it's about 200 different combinations. So what they did was they took that oncologist, sat him down with Watson, dumped everything that guy knows into Watson, plus all the research on oncology. Every single patient history, every drug-related fact was piled into Watson. Now what does Watson do? Doctor says, this is the sort of patient, it's a woman, 35 years old, etc. Watson comes back and it says this, now listen carefully. It says if you use A and C, 47% probability of being right. If you use D and F, 17% probability of being right, and so on. You get my point? And by the way, this is far more powerful than any human can contemplate. Far more powerful, and it's only going to get better. They say that today, computers can do 65% of all work that's out there. That's the world you guys are now entering into. And what's going on here? Here's a video. One sensor. I've got one sensor. It better be a very reliable sensor, right? Probably expensive because it's telling me about a whole bunch of stuff about that video. Got to be reliable, the packets have got to come in sequence, a whole bunch of stuff about the sensor. What if I did this? I put 10,000 sensors on that field. Now, a few hundred sensors go, doesn't matter. There's 9,000, you know how many left. Secondly, sequence doesn't matter. Thirdly, more data points, the more accurate. I'm not asking why, I'm asking what. Far more accurate than any finite, any human brain. This is the world that you guys are moving towards. Anybody seen this movie, Moneyball? Yeah. Okay, true story, right? True story. But obviously Brad Pitt played the part. Losing baseball team, bottom of the league, no more money. They're at the bottom, I was going to say at the pits, really down there. Brad meets this kid, one of you guys, a really smart kid, not one of you guys.
Yeah, it's perfect.
Really smart kid, mathematician. Kid says to Brad, you're looking in the wrong place. How do you normally pick a baseball team? Well, how much money he's earning, how good looking he is, how many runs he's hit, but that's not how you pick a team. That's not how you pick a team. You can pick a team using data. And that's what he did. So I'll just play you this clip.
So using this equation we have the left right here, I'm projecting that we need to win at least 99 games in order to make it to the postseason. We need